Hi guys and welcome to a new video here at Aero News Update. Today we're talking about flying long-haul aircraft within Europe. Not so special in Asia, not so special in the Americas, but in Europe indeed it is. And there are a couple of airlines you might have never heard before, especially if you are from Europe, so stay tuned. So let's get into it. Having an aircraft that has two aisles is considered to be a wide-body jet, so a long-haul aircraft, an aircraft that is meant to fly long distances, such as from Los Angeles to London or from Paris to Beijing. But some airlines use larger jets with a seat capacity of 300, 400, 500, even more seats, even on shorter routes as short as just a 35-minute flight. So why would they do that, and where can I find these? In the Americas, such as the United States of America, there you have it because of capacity. People are willing to travel from the west coast to the east coast in a very high number. And since airports are packed and there are a lack of slots, so that capacities at the airports to handle more daily flights, so more frequencies on the same route, airlines tend to use larger aircraft on this route just to make sure they can cope with the demand and transport all the passengers that want to go, for example, from New York to Los Angeles within a day. It is about that in Asia too, with, for example, being 18 787 Dreamliners, one that you see just behind me, with a capacity of about 400 seats each, traveling just between Tokyo and Japan and Seoul and in South Korea every single day. But in Asia there is another point that is very important for the airlines, which is not only the big demand of passengers wanting to fly from A to B across the big districts, the big cities within Asia, there's also a lot of cargo transportation because most of the Asian countries are island nations and they need to get cargo, post, mail and goods transported from, for example, South Korea to Japan, from Indonesia to India, from China to South Korea. All that can be easily done in a large aircraft because in the hold, not everything is full with luggage, there's a lot of cargo in there. So why is it that in Europe it is not so common that larger airplanes are used on shorter routes? Well, first of all, let's show the figures. Europe completed, so the whole, not the European Union, but the continent of Europe, has about a third, or let's say 40% at max, of the population of just India, and about half the population of China. So the capacity is reduced on every single flight because demand is not that high, not because people don't want to fly, but there are not too many people living in Europe. Furthermore, apart from the United Kingdom and Ireland and Iceland maybe, Europe is kind of a continental landmass, so this cargo aspect is not to be taken into account at all in Europe. So still there are some flights operated by very large aircraft within Europe, even on short and medium haul flights. Let's check out why this is the case and what airlines they are. So in Europe there are multiple different reasons why some long-haul aircraft, some big capacity jets are used within Europe, sometimes even on domestic flights. Let's get into the different reasons first. The first reason is crew training. It is something that Lufthansa, for example, is famous for. They introduced the 787 Dreamliner and introduced the A350 in the past years, and as of now, still, they are using this aircraft on a 35-minute flight between Frankfurt and Munich and back, and that on a double daily basis, Mondays to Fridays. Not because the demand between Frankfurt and Munich would be that high, usually the plane is flying on half empty or even less, but on the one hand, they need to train their crews, especially their cockpit crews, to gain sufficient landings to be allowed to operate in long-haul flights, and especially they want to show the gold members, platinum members, the frequent flyers of the airline their new showcasted long-haul product, just to convince them to fly with Lufthansa even on long-haul. The second main reason why long-haul aircraft are used within Europe is the so-called hub-and-spoke system. So what is that exactly? Hub-and-spoke means you have an airline that is operating one hub. So one airline has all flights within the whole network coming in and out of this airport. Such as, for example, Air France is doing it at Paris Charles de Gaulle, British Airways is doing it at London Heathrow, and Iberia is doing it at Madrid Barajas Airport in Spain. So what they do is they have all the long-haul operations going in and out of this airport, and also the short and medium haul flights within Europe go from and to this airport. They use the flights into the hub, let's say Iberia and Madrid, as a so-called feeder flight to connect to long-haul flights. So for example, somebody from Budapest in Hungary is flying on an Iberia jet to Madrid and then connecting onto a flight to Buenos Aires in Argentina with Iberia again. Once holiday is over, the same passenger can fly back for, to stay with my example, Buenos Aires via Madrid back to Budapest. Now, we have to take into consideration that there is so-called airline alliances. To make a long story short, it's that airlines cooperate on certain routes, that airlines work together, or that even one airline is a subsidiary of the other one. Such as, let's stick with Iberia and British Airways. They are both in the One World Alliance, and they both account for the so-called IAG, International Airlines Group. So essentially they are one company, Iberia in Spain and British Airways in the United Kingdom, and there are even more airlines that belong to the IAG. Iberia, as being a Southern European airline, is focusing on the long-haul market towards the Southern Americas and the Caribbean, whilst British Airways is focusing on North America, so the United States and Canada. So what they actually do is, Iberia is using long-haul aircraft such as the A330 and the Airbus A350 to fly between Madrid and London Heathrow on a frequent basis, just to connect the Spanish people to the London hub of their sister company British Airways to connect onto North America flights, whilst British people, for example from London or the London area, can fly with this long-haul aircraft to Madrid to connect to a flight to the Southern Americas where British Airways would not fly or in a very low frequency. So in this case, it is a transportation of hub and spoke passengers, so for connecting passengers from one hub to the other hub to make their connection to the destination they desire. There's two more examples for this inter-hub connecting system, which is, for example, Finnair. They operate the Airbus A350 long-haul aircraft, sometimes the A330, between their home base in Finland, in Helsinki, towards London Heathrow, British Airways hub. Why? Because British Airways, as already said, is a member of the One World Alliance, and so is Finnair. We also have this example in the SkyTeam Alliance, for example, with Air Europa. They are headquartered in Madrid, such as Iberia, but they, Air Europa, are member of the SkyTeam Alliance, and they operate together with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines, being member of the SkyTeam Alliance too, and they are headquartered in Amsterdam. So Air Europa is shifting around the different passengers from hub to hub, from Madrid to Amsterdam, from Amsterdam to Madrid, on their Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft, sometimes the Dash 8, sometimes the Dash 9. The third reason is use of aircraft, and for that, Turkish Airlines is very, very famous. Turkish Airlines operates flights to more destinations in the world than any other airline. That's fact. And they want to use their long-haul aircraft fleet, which is vast, with A330s, Boeing 777, A350s and 787 Dreamliners, most efficiently. So not only on Istanbul, New York and back, then the aircraft sits on the ground for 10 hours until it operates the next flight. No, they want to be more efficient. So what they do is they even use it on short and medium-haul flights, either because of cargo transportation, for example within Turkey, or even within Europe, just to fill the gap between the landing of the last long-haul flight the aircraft was coming from until the next one to depart. Which is why Turkish Airlines is operating the whole long-haul fleet also on domestic flights, for example from Istanbul to Ankara, to Kayseri, to Antalya, to Bodrum, to Izmir, and to other destinations such as Ercan in northern Cyprus. And they also operate those long-haul aircraft frequently to European destinations where there's a lot of demand for flights towards Asia or towards Africa. So Istanbul, again, being used as a hub. And they use those flights, for example, to Paris, to Düsseldorf, to Frankfurt, to Amsterdam, to London, and many more. The next reason for long-haul operations, or let's say long-haul aircraft operations within Europe, are so-called Fifth Freedom flights. What is this? Fifth Freedom flight means you operate as an airline a flight from point A to point B, but neither the origin nor the destination is your own country or not even your home continent. For example, Singapore Airlines operates a daily service between Singapore and Barcelona with a stopover in Milan. So it flies Singapore, Milan, Milan, Barcelona, Barcelona, Milan, Milan, Singapore. If they were not taking any passengers on the leg between Milan and Barcelona, this would not be a Fifth Freedom flight. But since you can book just a short sector of about 1.5 hour flight between Milan and Barcelona, this is called a Fifth Freedom flight. And since the aircraft came from Singapore, which is a long distance, obviously is a long-haul aircraft. In this case, an Airbus A350. Another airline that is doing the same thing is Ethiopian Airlines, and they do it on multiple routes. They have their hub in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, as the airline name would suggest, and they fly from Addis, for example, to Zurich in Switzerland, and there connect to Milan in Italy, and then fly from there back to Addis. So it's not kind of a triangle flight. Not as Singapore Airline does it with Milan and Barcelona back and forth. Ethiopian Airlines just operates it in one direction. So it's Addis to Zurich, Zurich, Milan, Milan, Addis. But you can book this 35-minute flight between Zurich and Milan on an Airbus A350. But that's not enough for Ethiopian Airlines. They even operate another European domestic route. Well, it is an international flight, but within Europe, which is between Stockholm and Oslo. And there they go back to back. So it is Addis to Stockholm, Stockholm to Oslo, Oslo, Stockholm, Stockholm, Addis. And again, this short 1 hour hop, or 1.5 hours between Oslo and Stockholm and vice versa, you can book them individually as a flight and enjoy a Boeing 787 Dreamliner on a very short flight. Another airline that operates a fifth freedom flight is a Chinese airline called Sichuan Airlines. They come from China and fly to Istanbul. So far, so good. But they continue this flight towards Athens and back. So Istanbul, Athens, Athens, Istanbul, you can fly a Chinese airline within Europe, and that on board an Airbus A330-300 series aircraft. That's so cool. So why is it that those carriers such as Singapore Airlines, Ethiopian Airlines, and in this case Sichuan Airlines are doing fifth freedom flights within Europe? Well, the reason is they want to have a high frequency, so on a daily basis, but Singapore Airlines can never fill an A350 just by the demand of Singapore to Barcelona. Neither can they on Singapore to Milan. So what they do is they combine the two destinations, which geographically are pretty much on one route. So in this case, they can, financially stable, operate this route on a daily basis by just combining the two destinations. It's the same thing with Sichuan Airlines, who want to fly to Athens and to Istanbul to bring Chinese tourists there and take them back. And on the other hand, Ethiopian Airlines wants to do the same thing with Milan and Zurich and with Oslo and Stockholm. That's the reason why they do it. And that's how Europeans can fly on long-haul aircraft of an airline that is not even European. The last category for flying short and medium haul on a long-haul aircraft from Europe is not really one that is intra-Europe, but since Europe is directly bordered to Northern Africa, for example, there's options too. For example, Air Algérie and Royal Maroc are operating their A330, or respectively the Boeing 787 Dreamliners, between their hubs and Paris, since they are both former French colonies and demand is very, very high. So Casablanca to Paris and Algiers to Paris are operating long-haul aircraft too. Sometimes even Egypt Air uses their Dreamliner from Cairo to, for example, London or other destinations in Europe because demand tends to be very peaky, especially during Ramadan season. And then, if we're talking about aero carriers, we have to include Royal Jordanian Airlines too. They operate their 787 Dreamliner on the Amman, Jordan to London Heathrow route. Why do they do that? Even though it's about a 5-hour flight which you can operate easily on an A320, again, it's because of the alliance. Royal Jordanian is also a member of the One World Alliance, such as British Airways. Another reason for long-haul aircraft flying within Europe is tourism demand. I'm talking about charter airlines, holiday, leisure airlines such as Neos in Italy or the TUI airlines, for example, in the UK, in the Netherlands and in Belgium. They all have 787 Dreamliners, be it a 787-8 and a 787-9, which especially in the winter season they use towards Egypt, they use towards the Canary Islands, for example, or even to Cape Verde. In the summer season, they tend to use them towards Antalya and Turkey, to the Greek islands, and to Mallorca, to Ibiza, to Minorca, whatever it was. So they seek the holiday season to use those long-haul aircraft. Outside holiday seasons, they use them for flights to the Caribbean mostly, or to Southeast Asia, such as Thailand, Bali, and whatever. I have flown more than 230 airlines so far, but it is a big problem for me that I can't fly on Sun-class airlines. It really pisses me off. Sun-class Airlines is the former Thomas Cook Scandinavia, which after the failure of Thomas Cook back in 2019, I believe, they rebranded to Sun-class Airlines, and they are operating exclusively on holiday charter flights, on package holidays from and to Scandinavia, being from Gothenburg, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Oslo and Helsinki. And from there they fly, for example, to the Canary Islands every single day on the Airbus A330-900 Neo series aircraft. I really want to fly them. If you know a way to book them, let me know in the comment section below. Let me give you one last aspect, and this is actually a contradiction of the things that I just told you. Remember at the beginning I said the population in Europe is not so dense, not so vast as in the Americas, as in Asia? You see, there are 6-hour, 7-hour flights, for example, from my home country, from Germany to the Emirates, for example, to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. They are operated on an Airbus A350, a narrow-body aircraft with 180-seat capacity, sometimes in full economy, sometimes in economy and business class configuration. So you see, even long-distance flights, and all flights above 4 or 5 hours are legally considered to be a long-haul flight, are operated on narrow-body aircraft because demand is so slim. So the contradiction is there are some routes, for the reasons I gave you, why you use large airplanes on short routes, but there might also be a very good reason, such as low demand, but the need to serve the destination, for routes that are long-haul routes, but still being operated by short-haul aircraft. Do you know any other airline that operates long-haul aircraft within Europe or from into Europe on a flight less than 5 hours long that I have missed? Let me know in the comment section below. And thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and tell me what you think. See you next time.